Oh, okay, seriously, I want to cry. I just did this tier list video. I spent 50 minutes talking passionately about a million different things, and the recording didn't go through. Oh, brutal. All right, round 2. This might be a little bit quicker. You might not get a full 50-minute discussion here because I just did all this. So I'm gonna reshoot this and double my afternoon here to re-record. Today, guys, we're looking at world bosses. Okay, so welcome, guys. Yeah, we're going to be looking at reviewing and giving our take on Guild Wars 2 world bosses. Now, when I originally came to you guys with the idea of doing tier lists, one of the big responses I had from everyone was do meta events. Now, I was thinking I could do a meta event video, but if you actually look, there are so many of them in the game, most of which most of you guys wouldn't recognize. Like, I'll have a box that I'll put on screen, and you guys won't even know what it's like necessarily referring to. Don't forget, like, every map has at least 2, generally speaking. And besides, what I think people really mean when they say do meta events is do world bosses. And a lot of people said do world bosses too. These are the big fights. These are the big moments that we tend to think about and have, you know, cool opinions on. So that's the idea. In addition to just general world bosses, we still have a billion different things to talk about. So for this video, I'm going to do core, just the core ones, and then I think in a part 2, if this is well liked, if people enjoy this topic, we could do a part 2 where we look at the expansions and living world stuff, and that can probably all go together into a single part. So, but core Guild Wars 2 has just so many of them that I like to run through them, and I don't want to just do world bosses either, but I'm going to include like the god temples on here too. And a little something else as well, just so that we've kind of got all of that to round ourselves out with. So, let's run on in. I'll do the whole tier list again, in any old order. Before, I was doing it in, like, a mid-game, early-game, late-game order, but now it's all messed up and random. I don't know, maybe we can try this. All right, let's start off like this. The Fire Elemental. So here we're talking about the Metrica Province Fire Elemental. It's kind of reused a little bit elsewhere. So it's a fine meta event. It's a cool world boss. It's one that I've done a lot of times, just by virtue of the fact it seems to come up very, very regularly on the world boss timer. You know, you can go in there, get a little bit of loot. And what I especially like about it is fire is cool, big, dangerous enemies are cool, and if you wade into this guy, you will instantly die. It's also set at the Thormanova Reactor, which is a fantastic location. And it's kind of got the, you know, that extra puzzle side of it at the Thormanova Reactor, which can unlock another boss at the end, the Steam Creature. All of which I think is really, really awesome. But in general, let's be real. The Fire Elemental is basically just standing around AFK while a long, slow golem escort happens. And during the fight itself, what mechanics do we have? Do we have break bars? Do we have cool random adds? Do we have cool ground telegraphs and stuff? Not really. You just kind of stand there, and because of power creep, and because the devs haven't really gone back and looked at the core game for years, a lot of the early game world bosses, the Fire Elemental included, just aren't really that fun, and there's not really much going on. So I'm actually going to drop him down in C. I like it, but in the grand scheme of things, this guy's going to be a little bit lower. Okay, another early game world boss would be... I'm looking at the list here, trying to see what I can find. The Svanir Shaman. The Svanir Shaman, I think, are very similar to the Fire Elemental in a lot of ways. You know, it's another one of these fights you just kind of stand around and blow the guy up. I have a particular disappointment with the Svanir Shaman in that I remember as the game was coming out, they talked about the idea of a meta event where a lake would freeze, and there was like a house that you could now get to because it was frozen or something, and you could go fight a boss there. None of that ended up being there. It is on an icy lake, but, you know, what is there to do? Now, I think the prees are quite interesting on the Svanir Shaman, and I think that, like, visually it's alright, but there's a downside to those visuals, and that's that this is, like, one of the lowest FPS experiences you can have in Guild Wars 2. Like, this will bring any rig to its knees if you've got, like, high reflections on the lake, plus the appearance of the storm, plus all the shadows, plus no culling and stuff. Like, it's just insane, and I kind of dislike that an early game event has such low frames. You know, it gives people a really bad impression of the game's optimization, which maybe they should rightly have, but I mean, so soon. So I don't know, I'm going to put the Svanir Shaman down here in C as well. It's kind of on the lower part of the list for me. Now, an early game boss that I do love is the Shadow Behemoth. So this is the Queensdale, the human one. This is one of the first world bosses I ever saw because they were showing it off in those conventions. I still remember when I finally got Guild Wars 2 and I was running around in Queensdale on my human. walking toward, or maybe it was in one of the betas that this memory is actually from, walking through the swamp and suddenly hearing a scream and watching the FOV of my camera pull out and realizing there was a world boss back there. I mean, it's so cool, isn't it? I love ghosts, I love underworldy stuff, and when we think about the actual fight here, there's more of a fight now. There's interesting mobs in the area. There's an idea of like a phase where you burst damage out. There's the phases where you have to spread out and break the portals. Again, it's power creeped and not as great as it used to be, but I adore the Shadow Behemoth. Unquestionably, he's in the A tier. Love this fight. And then there's actually only one early game world boss for us to talk about. That's the Great Jungle Worm. So this is the Savari one, Caledon Forest. And he's not bad. I mean, he's a giant worm. I like worms, especially from Guild Wars 1. You know, enormous worm enemies were kind of a big thing back then, like fighting Frostmoor, or who's the guy that you fight in Destruction's Depths? I can't really remember in Eye of the North. But it's a cool idea for a fight. What I don't really like about it, though, is that he doesn't really get enough time to do much damage. He was a fascinating fight because the husks were combined with it. And it was near the Nightmare Court entrance, the Twilight Arbor entrance with the Nightmare Court. And before Heart of Thorns came out, there's kind of this interesting idea it might be associated with a planty Elder Dragon. And that was all kind of fun. But I don't know. I mean, let's put him at the top. No, he's not better than the Fire Elemental. Let's put him like somewhere here in the middle of C. It's an okay fight, but again, somewhat mediocre, I would say. Right, so those are the early game bosses. And you might be thinking, well, hold on, WP, there's 5 races. We've only got 4 boxes here. The problem is, there's not really a Char one. Now, there is a Char meta event to do with the Ghost of Ascalon and sort of going near Ascalon City and fighting a specific Foe Fire Ghost, but it's not really a great world boss, is it? And to be honest, I think if you're a Char player, to this day, you should feel cheated by the fact that you don't get a boss in the Plains of Ashford. And honestly, you know, I hope one day ArenaNet goes back to those maps and actually looks at including something like that, because for now, really, there's just the 4 here, and that's about it. All right, let's jump through into some mid-game world bosses now as well. We got Tyder Covington. So Tyder is undoubtedly more sophisticated mechanically than all these other fights. The first half of her fight is, you know, just fighting her down 50%, but then she starts teleporting around the pirate base. I like that. I like all the pre-stuff with her as a world boss as well, where like you're running the kegs to the wall and blowing up. I mean, sure, it takes a while and it doesn't scale very well, but I think she's an okay meta event. She's more sophisticated than the other ones. The only problem I have with her is it is just kind of fighting a standard like human-sized enemy. There's not much spectacle to it. Though I do like being in the like narrow corridors and stuff as she teleports through those. But that lack of spectacle drops her down, and then maybe even that's not a problem if there's cool lore. But I kind of feel like Guild Wars is missing story about the Hydra Queen and about these extra pirate factions that are outside of Lion's Arch. Like, I feel like a cool story that could or should have been in the game is during the Claw Island arc when the Risen are attacking Lion's Arch. Maybe we should have gone and recruited people like Tyder. And then we would have had that connection, and then the meta event would have maybe meant a little bit more. She feels like she doesn't even feel like a B plot. She feels like a C or a D plot. For that reason, I don't know. I think she's going to be in C here, guys. She's more sophisticated than these other guys, but she's going to be in C. Okay, so next, who else is a mid-game boss? I'm scanning around. Here, we got Modnir Olgoth. So I love Modnir Olgoth. Modnir Olgoth is kind of something that ArenaNet do a few times. You're going to see more in a second on this tier list, where they take a personal story tutorial fight and they turn it into a full-on world boss later. So this is the Earth Elemental that humans experience at the start. I like the Earth Hands. I think that that's an interesting fight. If we just credit the world boss version for all that design, it's pretty badass. And this has lots of phases as well. You know, there's little moments where they run down the hill. It also helps with Modnir Olgoth that he's connected to Harathi in general. And Harathi, I think, is a fantastic map. Back before Mega Servers and back before they swapped world bosses onto specific timers, there was this really cool sense in Harathi of, like, it was like the world versus world PvE map, you know? People think about Drizzlewood, like, in those terms these days, or they think about some of the other sophisticated maps that come out in the other expansions, like Verdant Brink and stuff, for, like, territory control. But I kind of look at Harathi Hinterlands as, like, the progenitor of all of those. I have a very distinct memory of first getting to Harathi and fighting and clearing camps all the way from Seraph's Landing on the west, right through the whole map, and then it finally ended with this big badass world boss. It was fantastic. You don't quite get that experience these days, but it's still a good fight. I think it's better than the other ones. I think this is our first B tier. I really like Olgoth, seriously. Another guy that they took from a personal story tutorial fight is the Inquest Golem Mark II. So this guy exists on Mount Maelstrom, which actually has 2 world bosses, which is quite cool. Now, the Inquest Golem, I mean, what do I say here? It's a great design again, But again, I don't know, do I not just credit that with a personal story for the design? The actual fight itself, it's a rare example of a world boss that can actually do some damage back because of the electric floors. Like, it's got major damage. But the problem is, the telegraphs on the electric floor are really kind of rubbish. And everyone just, like, stacks on those crates. And it's kind of just, you just sort of ignore it. I do remember doing some speed clear kills of this in the past, which were vaguely fun, but I don't know. The pre's aren't too interesting with him either. I think he's a little bit better than Tider. Alright, we'll leave him in B tier, because it is a cool design. I do really like the idea of this big golem made out of all these little cubes. And there's a good amount of spectacle here, at least, which I can't say for Tider. To be honest, I think I prefer the Fire Elemental to Tider. Let's make it that little swap there. So yeah, I think the Inquest Golem goes there. The other, like, mid-game world boss is the Megadestroyer, who I can't quite get all of his text on screen. Now, you guys know me. I like fiery stuff. I like apocalypse. I like inferno-y things. So the Megadestroyer is definitely going quite high. I don't know if he makes it into the A tier. I really love the Shadow Behemoth, right? Seriously. We can put Shadow at S for now. But having recorded this video already, I know who's really going to be S. The Megadestroyer is awesome. It's got okay pre-stuff. The idea of the volcano and just the way that place looks is gorgeous. Like, I remember making videos in the past, like, demonstrating Guild Wars' beauty and graphics, and always wanted to get so many shots of that volcano, because it's just such a fantastic place. And I especially like this idea that you do spread out a little bit around the middle of the volcano. And I like this idea that he, like, emerges in the lava, and it's kind of maybe more of a ranged-based thing. Not that that's that novel necessarily. No, I just think he's cool, and I think he's cooler than Olgoth, so I'm going to put him at the top of B. So that's pretty much it for the mid-game bosses. Next, let's move into what I'm sure you guys have all been thinking about. I might have even had it in the title of the video, I don't know. But kind of the big three world bosses, in my mind, the truly major ones. And they start in the mid-game, they kind of go a little bit further than that. One of them is just like the Shadow Behemoth, and it came from a convention demo. Of course, I'm talking about the dragons. So, well, hold on. Just before we get to the dragons, hold on. We do have another thing to deal with, and that's Triple Trouble. So, in theory, I could have put this on the sequel episode. I don't know whether I'm doing the sequel episode, so I'm kind of throwing it in here. Triple Trouble is the Blood-Tide Coast fight, which it's kind of got a really special history to it, in that as a part of Living World Season 1, it was a new world boss where they actually tried to make it like a raid-like encounter. This was hardcore endgame. This was like seriously sophisticated, well-tuned, difficult stuff where you have 150 players and you have to spread them all over the map. And then when they get to their specific areas of the map, they have to be split again into these smaller groups that do all these specific jobs. Has a bunch of beautiful art, like one of the worms you can get swallowed by and end up inside. I loved this fight. This was also when telegraphs started coming in. Now, for me personally, Triple Trouble could be S tier. Triple Trouble represents one of the most enthusiastic periods I've had with Guild Wars, where I got really stuck into this, into playing this and commanding this and learning it and progressing through it. We kind of got screwed out of like getting world first and stuff because of some bugs with the event design, where if one of the bosses ran out of the event area, all the others on the other side of the map would scale down and then get burned too quickly and stuff, which kind of sucked. But overall, I was really, really happy with this update. I do love it. I do have a lot of personal joy and memory from it. So, and it's an incredibly sophisticated design, so I'll put it here. The one thing I would say is, in truth, I think Triple Trouble style format experiences aren't good. Having to get 150 people to have the experience, and even then only really the commanders get the full sense of what's going on. The idea that you can't trigger when it spawns is just going to come up every 2 hours, so everyone has to wait around for ages. The idea that you're trying to police and bully random players out of the map because they're taking valuable slots away from, you know, people that you would want instead. That stuff sucks, and I think ArenaNet realized that all that stuff sucked, and they wanted to do something better. That's why raiding came in with Heart of Thorns. So it was kind of an experiment, and I don't necessarily agree with it on the surface of it, so it's not too high, but for me personally, I did love this fight, and what it actually is, it's really, really, really good. I recommend people try it out and play it. The other thing I loved about this fight was that it had like a hidden phase as well. You know, you spend all that time trying to beat it. When you finally do, you realize, oh wow, there's this whole other section where you're fighting their decapitated heads. Fantastic. So, now let's go to the dragons. And I guess we'll start with Tequatl, who is just like Triple Trouble. For those of you that don't know, a year after Guild Wars 2 came out, there was an update with a basic LFG, which is still essentially the LFG we have to this day. But they also remade Tequatl, who at launch wasn't that interesting. Tequatl's a bit like the Shadow Behemoth in that it was introduced in conventions early on. And it wasn't that great for the first year. But after that, again, they did this raid style thing. They did this 150-man style thing. This was before even mega servers. So I remember my original server, Emery Bay, getting into their Discord or the TeamSpeak, one of those two. Sorry, their Ventrilo or their TeamSpeak. I can't remember which one they were using. This was before Discord days. And, you know, seeing how people were doing. This was so brutal. I remember if you just casually wandered up to the boss with some randoms, you wouldn't even see like 5% of his health bar move. And then you'd see these other people actually getting closer. What a fantastic update this was. I love just the structure of this meta. Now, if you guys have been playing it in the power crept version of it that's existed ever since, where, you know, you just kind of stand around and kill it every day, I feel like you're only getting a tiny bit of the story. When it was really well tuned, and it was like you had the turrets, which have to keep the scales off to stop the bone wall coming up. But then enemies are going to attack the turrets, so you need to figure out people who defend the turrets. And when we were like progressing and the answers weren't actually out there on the internet, that question of, okay, how do we position everyone? Do we all spread out around the water? Do we consolidate around both of his feet at once? Do we all stack on one foot? Which foot? Where do we stand? All those kind of questions were really cool. And the idea that you might fail the battery phase, everyone sprints off and runs away is this huge spectacle, with the megalith cannon that you're trying to fire, whose animation has been broke for years, by the way. Or you get the tidal wave that just wipes everyone. This is a cool event. There was so much stuff. The fact that he drags you underwater, and then you got to swim up to the surface. This is one of the coolest things they ever put in the game. I'm going to put that at S. Is Tequila my favorite? I can't remember. On the other version of the video a second ago, I can't remember what I put at the top. It might be this. I love all these fights. All these fights that are up here right now, they're so good. But Tequato is probably the king, I think, of them all. And it was such this brief period of time where you could truly experience the magic of Tequato launch. It even had cool rewards and stuff, right, with the extended weapons. So yeah, just totally badass. All right, then we got the other dragons. So you got the Shatterer too. Now I got a bit of nostalgia and enjoyment with the Shatterer because again, it was a convention thing like with the Shadow Behemoth. Generally speaking, I don't think he's as cool though, not these days, because I've never really had that tense cool experience like I had with Tequato. They did do the update and they interacted gliding with it and they had some new forms of branded enemies. The idea was to make the fight more sophisticated, but I feel like they didn't really land it. The whole idea of that patch was to stop people stacking on the hill, and people still stack on the hill. So, I don't know. I think, honestly, guys, I like the Shatterer. It will stay in A, okay, because Guild Wars 2 is about fighting dragons, and you can't take away those early trailers in 2012 that launched the game and stuff. The Shatterer is a badass. He definitely deserves to be up there. And don't get me wrong, he's a much more sophisticated fight than the Shadow Behemoth, but I honestly think I prefer the Shadow Behemoth, just in terms of like personal looking back and smiling and remembering the things I thought were cool. I think I like the Shadow Behemoth more. Like if you ask me, WP, I'm going to update one of the world bosses, which one do you want me to update? I would say Shadow Behemoth over Shatterer, for sure. I love the idea of the Shadow Behemoth a lot more. So anyway, yeah, he's very cool, and that's where I'd put him. Then we have the final dragon, and I don't know, this might be a bit of a controversial move for a lot of you guys. I'm going to move him down. He's not in S, he's not in A, he's not even in B. I think he's at like the top of C. I don't like the Claw of Jormag much. Look, the art is great, alright? He's a cool, icy looking dragon. I think the novelty of his art is worn off since he's been reused in so many other places across the game now. And I like that they've got like special things. I like that the fight appears in 2 different areas. And when you fire the cannons and he gets knocked out of the air, you can stand next to that rock and get an achievement as he crushes you and stuff. I like that. But I think the way that most of the mechanics here come across just feel rubbish. Like the perma-fear spam and the health drain unless you're holding one of those turret, like flamethrower items where you have to stand still clunkily, like injecting the heat. It just doesn't feel very good, you know? And everyone just stands in that one little place to fight an ice wall. It's not that fun. And then in phase 2, where you're supposed to be escorting the golems that are going to get broken by the ice, like those little ice pillars, you kind of break them, but then the golems die anyway. It just feels clunky, you know? There's something about this fight that feels clunky. And then there's the fact that I kind of did so much Claw of Jormag back in the day, trying to get like a precursor drop, which never came. So I just generally, I don't have much personal memory or enthusiasm for it. And then it's like icy themed. I'm not that into icy stuff. So yeah, I think Claw of Jormag goes all the way down to C. And it now, unlike the Shatterer and unlike Tequato, it never had that second update either, did it? It never did. You know, the other thing I think the game's kind of missing is like a fiery Primordus dragon in the core areas. Megadestroyer kind of takes that role, but I mean, it is just a big destroyer. It would have been cooler if it was a full-on dragon, but there you have it. All right, so there you go. So, there's still a question of what's going to be in D, my least favorite. For now, Tequato is in S. Actually, I think Tequato is just my S tier. Yeah, Tequato's got to be at the top. Tequato's awesome. The launch Tequato is just so good. It would be either Tequato, Triple Trouble, or Shadow Behemoth for sure. So, now we're going to move into the temples. So, and again, there are a lot of other random little fights we could do. Like, there's another version of the fire elemental, like the flame shaman in one of the char maps that maybe you could look at and stuff. But I don't know. Maybe that's a separate topic altogether. Let's go with the temples. So, first we have the Temple of Balthazar. Oh, what did I do there? Did I accidentally misclick and move the fire elemental? So, we got the Temple of Balthazar. So I kind of love the Temple of Balthazar, honestly. If you guys don't know, these days you get obsidian shards everywhere in the game, right? Well, back when the game came out, the only place really to acquire them was at the Temple of Balthazar. It was kind of alluding to the Fissure of Woe situation in Guild Wars 1. And the Temple of Balthazar itself was really hard to take because its pre-events were really punishing, and the boss himself was really punishing. Like, you had this morale bar to deal with. If the morale got too low, that was it. It was over. So I loved all of that about the Temple of Balthazar. He was undoubtedly the most fun temple of them all for that reason. Nowadays, and all that early legendary collecting and stuff, going there and trying to kill him so that you could spend all the karma you'd been grinding up. I mean, that was cool. Nowadays, though, I mean, that's all gone because obsidian shards are everywhere and it's power crept anyway. So you don't really have any great fascinating experiences. So I don't know. I think he drops down, to be honest. I think we'll put him at the bottom of B. Well, okay, so hold on. No, I'll put him at the top of B. I liked the Temple of Balthazar. Not so much these days. The next temple, let's go geographically. We've got the Temple of Lissa. So Lissa, it's weird. If you guys just asked me out of the blue, WP, what's your favorite meta event in the game? I would be likely to say Lissa. Seriously. I think she should be a S. It's to a certain degree. So Lissa, what I love about Lissa is like the cinematics of the thing. You get the giant circular arena. You get this idea of fighting the boss, and then every now and then her protective shield comes up. So then you all have to spread, and you have to run along these high roads. It's kind of like Divinity's Reach, right? It's like a Divinity's Reach fight, but there's 3 big roads. You run down them, and then you've got like different mechanics to do in these different mini areas. All 150 players are spread through those. If you succeed, then everyone charges back. And this moment where you have like an army bearing down on the statue of Lissa, corrupted by Zaitan, and everyone's like running along. Between the roads are all these cool like risen trebuchets that are trying to siege people as they go. So maybe you have members of the army down there destroying them. Like, there's such a cool vision to the whole thing, you know? And the mechanics themselves, when you're fighting the boss, she's like the first eyeball mechanic. She actually has a look away mechanic here. It's weirdly telegraphed, but it's been there in Guild Wars 2 since launch. You got all the risen gorillas, and I've had lots of experience in the past of them swarming people and destroying them. Like, I like all of that stuff about the event. The thing is, everything I just said, as beautiful as that is, the tuning has never really landed for that, has it? And to be honest, most of the time I go to Lissa, you just kind of kill her, and that's it, it's over. So, I don't know, I feel like this is, with better tuning, with like a core Tyria update, the Temple of Lissa could be awesome, but it's just my imagination, isn't it, really? So I don't think I can put it at S. I actually lived the real experience with Tequil. It actually happened. I've only ever imagined how cool Lissa could be. So I love Lissa. I'm going to keep it at A. It doesn't deserve to be at A. It's better than Balthazar, but it's definitely my favorite temple. And just the pure design I really like, but I think you can only make it to the top of B here. Next, we get the Temple of Dwayna. I don't really have many memories of the Temple of Dwayna, to be honest. I mean, it's got a cool story, don't get me wrong. The Malkor stuff's really cool. But it's basically just an escort, isn't it? I mean, there's a certain novelty to having the fight and then doing a bunch of escorts and coming back to the fight. You don't really see that anywhere else. I think that's interesting. But overall, it's not a particularly exciting temple to me. It's cooler. It's not as cool as the Claw of Jormag. Let's put it above the Fire Elemental, just because it's got that cool lore on it. Temple of Melandru is probably my least favorite temple. I mean, I like the idea of being swarmed by loads of nature-themed risen zombies, like hordes of zombie spiders and hordes of zombie gorillas and stuff. That's basically what that is. But there's not much interesting story. There's not many interesting mechanics. I think it's just kind of a meh temple, to be honest. So I'm going to put it really low, actually. It doesn't even really have the spectacle in my mind that something like the Great Jungle Worm does. So we'll put it down here. I don't think Tida's better than it, though. So Tida's going to shift this way. And so finally, the last temple is Grenth. So I actually have a lot of personal experiences loving Grenth. How I earned my money in Guild Wars in the early days was farming Grenth for corrupted lodestones, like sort of in a cheesy way, stalling the event at a certain place, getting corrupted lodestones. I used to farm it with a thief friend who would tag enemies with short bow 1. And then I spent all that money I made on Halloween weapons, which I sold months later for massive profit, and boom, that's how I got my first legendary. So I love Grenth, and I actually think Grenth is a really interesting, mechanically set up meta, in that you have all the back and forth at the lighthouse as you actually travel over on the island. And then once you're on the inside, if one event fails, it might only knock you back a bit. And then if that next one fails, it will knock you back further. There's actually a bit of push-pull. The fight itself is quite interesting. The idea that the boss is constantly putting, damage stacks on you that you can only hide from if you submerge yourself in, the other world through the rifts or whatever that they are there. And, you got all the ice spikes that come down everywhere. I even like that the Temple of Grenth doesn't actually technically end with the boss. The Temple of Grenth ends with this, all-out horde assault. A bit like we were talking about with Melandri, but that's, the final moment of the temple. Which I kind of think is quite cool as well. So just through personal experience, I'm going to put the Temple of Grenth. I think it's better than Balthazar. Yeah, I think Balthazar was cool for the mechanics and stuff, but I'm going to put it there. Grenth here, Lissa. That's a pretty good list right there, I think. Okay, so we have one final box. And you guys might be wondering what it is. It's actually what I'm going to put in D tier here. On the original shoot of this video, I was surprised that this ended up happening, but I'm sticking to my guns. And I'm putting it here. It's the Risen High Wizard. So this is the only, real major world boss that isn't associated with a temple or whatever in Ore. This is, in some ways, guys, the final boss of the game. And I know technically it doesn't count as a world boss for, the timers and stuff, if that's what you're doing. But, I mean, come on. This is the end of the final meta assault. Now, the idea of that last meta, that you're traveling up through this promenade of the gods, and there's all the statues around. And if the statues have been claimed because of the temples, they're really useful to you, or they're doing damage to you. I love that. I love that idea that this final push is even the environment itself might be rising up against you unless you've split off and done the other temples on the way. There's something so beautiful and cool about that. But since mega servers and stuff, none of that really matters. And what about the fight itself? The fight itself is boring. There's basically nothing going on. And I kind of feel like it's a huge disappointment. This should be the coup de grace. This is the last final incredible moment. The shining gem on the mountain of gems that is Guild Wars 2's open world. And it's the Risen High Wizard. So I think for, it's a mediocre non-spectacle fight. So it's got the worst of all these other things. But then also, because it could have been or should have been so good, I think I'm going to rate it the lowest of all. So there you have it, guys. That's take 2. Well, what do you know? Last time, genuinely, I did 50 minutes of discussion justifying these. You get it in half an hour this time. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching, guys. My throat is sore. If you want to have any discussion about it, if you think I've rated something wrong, or if I've missed a boss that you really love, drop it in the comments, and if there's some good walls of text, some good back and forth, I would love to do another video, like a follow-up discussion on this. Do a tier list and then a chat, a tier list and then a chat. I love that idea, but it only really kind of happens if you guys have thoughts for me down below. So let me know with that, and I'll be watching the numbers and stuff. If I can do a part 2, that would be really cool as well. That would include the Heart of Thorn stuff, the Path of Fire stuff, and any prominent Living World stuff as well. That might be fun to look at in the future. So there you have it, guys. That's it for you. If you missed it yesterday, I did a build video on how to feel like a god as an elementalist. And can I just say, you guys were really lovely about that video in the comments, so I much appreciate that. Check it out if you like. And for everyone else, I'll be streaming probably right now, back to Final Fantasy for the first time. If you guys don't know, Final Fantasy's expansion Endwalker just came out, and I'm right on the doorstep of that product. So I'm going to be starting a playthrough of that new thing, very soon. So if you're even vaguely interested in Final Fantasy, it's a great time to start watching those streams. Should be a link in the description. Thanks, guys. See you next time.